I am not gonna lie with you guys, my boat is an absolute pigsty. It is a mess. There's still baits over here from when I did that spring unboxing. There's monster bass boxes over there, some tackle boxes. None of the compartments are clean, and so if I wanna do any fishing in the springtime, if I wanna do any fishing over the next couple of weeks, I'm gonna have to get this thing cleaned up. But today, we're actually gonna be talking my top 5 early spring baits. And what that means is that ice is starting to leave the lakes. We're hoping that we can go fishing by the end of next week, maybe 2 weeks from now. So that's really exciting, and I hope you guys are as excited as I am because I'm already tying on some baits, already getting some stuff ready for that initial trip, and I want to share that with you guys. But if you don't know who I am, my name is Benjamin Nowak. That's the name of the channel, that's the name of the game, and we're going to be talking my top 5 early spring, kind of late winter time baits. This is when the water is really cold, ice out to about 48 degrees, and these are the baits that I'm going to have tied on when I get to the lake to hopefully catch some fish. Hey, I just want to make you guys aware, if you haven't already signed up for the May 8th meetup / fishing tournament / event on Lake St. Clair, you guys should do so down in the description. There's a boater link, there's a non-boater link, and what's really cool about this is we're doing a first come, first serve non-boater link. What that means is if you don't have someone with a boat that can go on Lake St. Clair, or you're not comfortable running your boat out there, or you don't have a way out to Lake St. Clair, we're offering spots where you guys can still have an opportunity to fish on Lake St. Clair. Like I said, it's first comes, first serve, so don't wait. But if you're gonna do that non-boater link, you have to be committed to the event, because I don't want you guys saying, hey, I'm gonna fish the event, I don't have a boat, will you link me up with someone, and then last minute you guys back out on me. So please, go down there, sign up for that event. It's gonna be a lot of fun. It's $10 per guy. It's gonna be run through Tourney X, which is an app on your phone. It'll be the 5 longest fish by inches, and it's just going to be a lot of fun. It's not a serious event. We're all going to show up. I'm going to have some sponsor prizes. I know Berkley has already talked about getting some stuff in there. I'm going to talk to TFO, maybe Do It Molds, some other companies to donate some awesome prizes. 100% payout. I don't want to make money off you guys. Just think it's going to be a great time of year to be on Lake St. Clair. Early May is probably one of the best. My buddy Caleb Bell from Bass Quest will be out there. Ron and Durds, and I'm sure Josh and Thad will try to be out there. My buddy Mike Goodwin might come. Just a lot of fun. Tons of really cool fishing dudes will probably be at this event. So I encourage you guys to sign up if you haven't already, and it's going to be a lot of fun. If you guys haven't already signed up, go down there, sign up for the event. Without further ado, let's dive into the video that you guys actually came here to watch. Bait number 1, my favorite bait to throw in the springtime when the water is cold, is a jig. Now this is a really effective technique, largemouth and smallmouth, especially in really cold water. It catches big fish and you can use it to catch a lot of fish. And my favorite style of jig to throw in the springtime is a finesse style jig. Now this is a jig that I made at home. I bought the head, I believe, on Tackle Warehouse, but I tied a living rubber skirt, which is gonna give that bait a lot of flair and a lot of lifelike movement even when the jig is sitting still, because that rubber wants to float and expand and kind of move around. But there's also a little bit of flashaboo in there, and I'm typically fishing a brown or a black and blue jig in the springtime. For me, that brown is imitating a crawfish or early spring bluegill or something really, really natural, and that black and blue is when that water gets a little bit off color. I like that living rubber in the springtime, and those are my favorite colors to throw that jig in the spring. Now this is a very finesse style jig, this little 3/0 hook. So it's a really small presentation, and then I have a do nothing style trailer on there. This is actually an ICraw jig trailer. I poured it over on the bait making channel. You guys are gonna see that video on Monday, which will be the 8th of March, but it is a very realistic Craw style trailer that's gonna go on the back of the jig. Another really, really good trailer that I like to fish in the springtime is a Berkley Chigger Craw. Typically it's the 3-inch size. For that smaller jig, I go with the 3-inch size. If I'm largemouth fishing with a little bit bigger jig, I will go to the 4-inch size and then just bite the little end off of there. And this is not intended to be a monster bass plug, but just so happens to be that we got the Chigger Craw in the monster bass bag for the month of March. And we also got a Hail Craw, which I've never seen in person, but just like that jig trailer that I poured over on the bait making channel, it's a very kind of lifelike looking do nothing style trailer, but this was not intended to be a monster bass plug. I just found it very interesting that 2 of the baits that I were talking about, the Chigger Craw and a natural looking crawfish style bait, came in the monster bass box this month. But here's another look at that ICraw. This is the trailer that I have on that jig right now. Super realistic Craw style trailer. It's sort of a motor oil with red and black flake. Really, really good color. And if you guys know anything about the springtime, red is a staple. So that little bit of red mixed in there is going to give it a little flair. And again, that little jig is going to catch a bunch of big fish. The rod that I like to pair it with is a TFO Tactical 736. It's a 7'3" heavy rod. I like that a little bit longer rod because I can set the hook when I make a long cast or a long flip to a piece of cover or structure in a little bit deeper water, which is where a lot of these fish tend to sit, especially early spring, is sort of on those channel swings or leading in points going into the back of the pocket. Then I have a 7 speed gear ratio reel and 17 to 20 pound test fluorocarbon line. I'm a big believer in fluorocarbon, so that's what you're gonna see me fish. And in the springtime, I think it does make a difference. Those fish can kind of have more time to get a look at your bait, so fishing fluorocarbon is gonna be virtually invisible underwater. It might help you get a couple extra bites. Bait number 2, and this is probably honestly more fun than fishing a jig, just because it's a moving reaction style bait, is a flat-sided crankbait. This bait here is the Berkley Frittside 9, and unless you guys have been living under a rock, the Frittside has been one of the most popular flat-sided crankbaits on the market over the last couple of years, and the reason for that is that it just catches a ton of fish in cold weather. John Cox won at Rayburn last year on this. He just had another really good finish down on the Tennessee River, Loudon and Tellico. But the Frittside is essentially a flat-sided crankbait, and it fishes like balsa, but it's made of plastic, which is really, really unique. They have this weighting system in this bait, so you can cast it a long ways, but it has a tighter wiggle and a very subtle presentation with no rattles in the body in this bait. Now, the reason I go with the 9 is I'm typically fishing a little bit deeper water, but they also have a 7 and a 5, depending on how deep you want to be fishing. But for me, that 9 is where I'm going to start, and then if I'm fishing shallower, if I feel like I'm digging bottom a little bit too hard, I'll go to the 7 or the 5, but really the 9 is where I'm going to start in red colors or in some brown bat colors. The rod that I'm throwing this on is the TFO brand new tactical glass rod. This has become one of my favorite cranking rods, and I like the fact that it is a composite rod because a lot of times those bites this time of year tend to just be like mouth bites. They just kind of grab it and slowly turn on it. So having a glass rod that's not going to rip that bait away from them is really important. And I'm either going to fish it on the 745, which is a medium heavy, or I'm going to fish it on the 724, which is a medium 7.2 rod. The reason I like both of those, they're both glass, but it kind of lets that fish get that bait a little bit before I swing on them, which is important in the springtime. Like I said, it's not a vicious strike typically, so a lot of times those fish kind of get it, they kind of push it, they kind of just get really mushy on that crankbait. So having a glass rod or a composite rod like this right here is really important. Kind of let that bait and let that rod load up before you're able to swing into those fish. Delay is really the key term there. But it is a reaction strike, which is why I'm fishing it in the colder water, right? These fish still have to react. If something's coming by them at a moderate pace and it catches the side of their eye, they have to come over and eat it. So fishing a crankbait is a really fun way to cover water and catch a lot of fish in the springtime. And the reel I'm throwing it on is a 6 speed gear ratio reel with 14 pound test fluorocarbon line. I don't like to go any less than 14 when I'm fishing around cover of any sort, just because I think you risk breaking off fish or breaking off your bait quite a bit. So 14 pound test is my favorite pound test fluorocarbon when I'm fishing a square bill style rod. Continuing on that path with moving baits, we're going to be talking about a moderate deep diving jerk bait. Now this bait here is the Dual Realis 100 deep diving suspending jerk bait. So it's 100 millimeters long, but it's a deeper diving bait. I caught a ton of fish on the regular 100 SP last year, this exact color, which is the AM edge color, but having this a little bit deeper diver is going to let me reach those deeper depths. It's going to have a different action and movement in the water than that traditional 100 SP. So I'm super stoked on this bait, and I can't wait to get out there and fish this thing. But having a deeper diving jerk bait, again, like I mentioned, it's going to let me reach these fish in a little bit deeper water, that 8 to 10 foot range, which is nice because a lot of times these fish are setting up in those little bit deeper water areas. So having a little bit deeper diving jerk bait is going to be nice to let me get down there a little bit better. The rod that I actually throw this on is a cranking rod, but this is a graphite or carbon fiber cranking rod. So this has a lot of snap to it. But the reason I like fishing the jerkbait on a cranking rod is the fact that it loads up really well. So when that fish eats the bait, I'm fishing light wire treble hooks. Having a cranking rod really lets me fight these fish effectively. So it's a 7 foot CB. It's a medium cranking rod 7 foot in length, which played a huge role for me last spring in hooking and catching a whole bunch of fish. The reel that I'm throwing this on is an Abu Garcia ALF. It's an 8:1 to 1 gear ratio reel, so it's a super high speed gear ratio reel. A lot of times when you're jerkbait fishing, those fish hit it on the paws and they keep coming to you, so fishing a higher speed gear ratio reel, in my personal opinion, is really important. That way you can catch up to those fish and really keep contact with them. You're not using the reel to move the bait, you're using the rod to do that. So having a reel that's a little bit higher speed gear ratio that can handle these moderate to lighter baits is really important. I'm fishing it on 10-pound test line. That's gonna let this bait get as deep as it possibly can, kind of hang there, suspend there, and those fish again can get a really good look at this bait. So fishing that lighter line is gonna give you a little bit more of an advantage over those kind of line shy fish. Now we're gonna move into the spinning setup applications, and this is where a lot of people consider it not fun to fish, but there's a technique that I've found to grow and love, and that is a Ned Rig. A Ned Rig has caught me so many fish, probably more fish than any other bait in my boat over the last couple of years. And the reason for that is it is a very finesse style presentation that you can fish along the bottom and get fish to bite when they won't bite anything else. So when they're not biting the jig, they're not biting the crankbait or the jerkbait, I can pick up a Ned Rig and almost guarantee myself at least a couple of bites. Now this is a Berkley half head in a 1/4 ounce or 3/16 of an ounce is kind of my go-to size. And then a Z-Man TRD Hogs. I kind of fell in love with the TRD Hogs last spring, and the reason for that, it looks like a little crawfish, has a really unique profile underwater, but also has these little tentacles that are gonna move a little bit of water. It's not really a totally do nothing presentation, but when you're just fishing it really slow, because it is Z-Man plastic, it's gonna stand up straight, it's gonna kind of keep a tail up in the water, look like a little crawfish in a defensive posture, look really good down there underwater, and catch you a lot of fish. My favorite color is like the Drew's Craw or Green Pumpkin or the Deal. Just really natural colors. I don't get too crazy with it. So this is a really effective presentation in the spring. Like I mentioned, that's the Berkley half head, Green Pumpkin, and 3/16 of an ounce or a 1/4 ounce. Or I've started pouring my own Ned heads. And the reason I do this is to kind of get the exact hook that I want. This hook that I'm pouring in here is a Gamakatsu 111 hook. It's a 2-aught hook. So it is a little bit too big for this bait. But if you're fishing a little bit bigger Ned Rig style baits, you can fit them on this hook. There's no flex in it. And so you're gonna be able to fish this. It's gonna keep these fish buttoned. You can really customize everything about it when you pour your own Ned Rig. And that's a Midwest Finesse Ned head. The gear that I'm throwing that on is a TFO Tactical Elite 713, which is a 7-1 medium light. Fishes more like a medium moderate rod. The reason I like this, and this is probably my all-time favorite spinning rod, is it really has a lot of bend in the rod. It's a little bit slower of a rod, so when you're fighting those fish, the rod really plays them and wears them out. It's also a little bit longer in that 7-1 than your traditional 6'9", 6'10 spinning rod that a lot of guys like to throw a Ned Rig on, and it just handles these fish really well. It's light, it's balanced, and I've caught a ton of fish on this with a Ned Rig, with a drop shot. So if you're in the market for a brand new spinning rod, check out the Tactical or Tactical Elite TFO 713 spinning rod, and I promise you guys, you will not be disappointed. The reel that I'm throwing on there is an Abu Garcia Zata, 6:2 to 1 speed gear ratio reel. Not only does it look good, but it performs well. Really good drag system, a 3000 size spinning reel, which is gonna help me manage that line a little bit better, make longer casts, be a little bit more precise, and those larger size spinning reels actually have a better drag system. Let me just kind of get into this really quick, but a drag system on a bigger size spinning reel is more effective because you have more surface area at the top of the reel where your drag system is at, so there's more pressure, consistent pressure around the top of that reel, which is where that drag is really set. But it also manages your line better, less line twists, your line comes off the spool a lot better. So fishing a little bit larger size spinning reel as opposed to a 2000 or 1000 size reel, it's gonna help you manage your line better, fight these fish more effectively, and get more fish in the boat. And it is a 6:2 to 1 gear ratio reel, so it's a little bit higher speed gear ratio to fight these big smallmouth when they eat it and start to rush towards you. Now, I keep talking about smallmouth. That's what I did all last year. This channel used to be called the Smallmouth Experience, but these will all work for largemouth as well. The crankbait's a great largemouth bait. Jerkbait, I caught a ton of largemouth on last spring. The jig, obviously, is a great largemouth bait. So all of these presentations will work for either species, which is pretty cool. That may not be true as we move later into the year, but for now, they pretty much all work for either species. In this final technique, is one that kind of was kept under wraps for the past couple of years, but one that has really kind of blown up in the market lately, and that is a hair jig. Now, not just any hair jig, but a hair jig that you're gonna be swimming in the column. Where this is gonna be really effective is when those fish kind of start roaming on flats. When things kind of slick off, that's really where the hair jig is gonna play. And this is a brown and white hair jig, but typically my favorite color is a black one. I just had this one already tied on from the fall. But what's really cool about this is when the water slicks off, when things get really, really tough, you can pick up a hair jig and typically fan cast and kind of slow creep this along these big, expansive flats where these fish are gonna come up and start to roam, especially as that water temp starts to rise. And you can catch some really big fish on a little hair jig. My favorite size is a 3/32 of an ounce or a 1/8 of an ounce, depending on kind of the depth that I'm fishing. Typically 3/32 would be like less than 8 foot of water, and then like less than 12 to 8 foot of water would be my 1/8. But it's gonna depend on the line size that you're fishing, the depth that you're fishing, and even the kind of cover that you're fishing around. This is one that I tied myself. This is on a Midwest Finesse head, and it's got a Gamakatsu 111 1/0 hook in there. Just a really good profile. Now here is the secret of fishing a really light hair jig. If you guys look on the shank of that hook right there, there is a tiny piece of Berkley Max Scent hitworm. This is going to allow you to cast this bait a lot further. If you try to cast a hair jig without anything on the shank of the hook, you're gonna really want to beat your eyes in because it gets really tough. It's hard to cast a 3/32 ounce bait, so adding a little piece of, I like the hitworm, adding a little piece of plastic on that hook is going to help you cast the bait a lot further. To me, max scent is just another factor in catching these fish. When they're coming up behind that bait, deciding if they want to eat it, if there's any sort of scent coming off that bait at all, it's another factor that might help you get a couple extra bites, which is why I go to the max scent baits on the back of there. It's just something that I do. It's my personal preference, but I think it might help me get a couple extra bites. The rod that I throw this on is actually a walleye series rod. This is the TFO Professional Walleye Series 7'6" medium light. The reason I like this rod, it's a little bit longer rod, but it has the snappy tip that you need to cast this bait out there, but still loads up deep enough in the rod where you can get a good hook set. It also has a longer handle than some of the other spinning rods that TFO has right now, and so you can really get it under your arm and just slow wind this thing. And when that fish bites, just lean into them. This is not like a big hook set. You're not gonna try and rip their face off with this thing. You're fishing a light wire hook, a light rod, light line. So all you wanna do is really just kind of pull into that fish, let it load up. And so by having it under your armpit, sort of lets you do that a little bit more effectively. And then I'm fishing it on a slow speed gear ratio reel. This is a 5 speed gear ratio reel with 10-pound test braid to 6-pound test fluorocarbon line. Really, really finesse setup. It'll get you a couple extra bites when things slick off, when things get tough and the water temps are starting to rise maybe just a little bit, those fish start to push up on the flats. That can be a technique that will catch you some big fish. So that's it. Those are my top 5 baits for early spring bass fishing. Largemouth or smallmouth, all these techniques will work, and it's gonna be a great way to go out and maximize your efficiency on the water this spring when the fish start biting and you get open water, which hopefully here will be in the next week or two. So if you guys have any questions or comments, or there's a bait you guys think I might have missed in my top 5, let me know down there in the comment section below. If you're not already subscribed, please do me a huge favor, hit that subscribe button down below. I have to clean up this boat, clean up this tackle, because this thing is a mess, and if I want to go fishing anytime soon, I gotta get a couple things taken care of before I can even do that. So I'll catch you guys next time. Thank you guys for watching. Take care, tight lines. God bless. Pursue passion.